What Me Worry. I mean, who's not familiar with that, at least in the under 90 age group?
So we might have to spend just a brief moment then, Caleb, explaining to Mike about What Me Worry, or do you get the reference, Miller?
Yeah.
Well, first of all,
for the over 90.
No. Yeah, no. I mean, but Howsam thinks I'm 147. Dude, when I was a young lad, this, of course, before we had radio even, maybe even the talkies. Mad Magazine, I got every episode of Mad Magazine. I mean, it just, they were not only hilarious, they were, I think, ahead of their time. And I think, man, the drawing was just outstanding.
Yeah, it's funny, Caleb. You're mentioning the shift at Cracked. One of the really frequent guests on Dennis Miller's radio show for years is now one of the editors over at Cracked, and their stuff is just awesome. I mean, it is really fantastic. It is.
Well, you were talking about the artists at over at Mad Magazine. I think I'm trying to remember the guy's name, Don Martin.
Don Martin, exactly.
He was when Mort took over at Cracked, they won away a number of the artists from Mad Magazine, including Don Martin, who was basically the spirit of the magazine when I was reading it. When I was a kid, he was the.
He has to be well on in years, doesn't he?
I would think so now, yeah.
Remember I Spy? Wasn't it I Spy?
It was Spy versus Spy.
Spy versus Spy.
Yeah.
The stuff was genius. Hey, listen, this is Howsam knows I'm OCD and ADHD. I got to digress for less than 30 seconds. Were you not at CPAC and in that small group where we were with Ted Cruz?
I was, yes.
You were filming, and I asked him 2 questions, and you said to me, I have the video.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, dude. I just had to. It just clicked, and I went, wait a minute, that was Caleb.
Oh, so you guys have actually met in real life before?
That was about the extent of it. But yeah, he was filming that. There was a small group of us of bloggers exclusively invited to ask questions of Ted Cruz. And as I recall, you were kind of back over my right shoulder, and you were I would maybe be somewhat in your line of sight, but directly looking at Cruz. But I thought to myself again, light bulb went off, and damn it, that was Caleb Howe.
Hey, so let me ask you a serious question about this, Caleb. Any uncomfortability on your part about being involved in publishing an article with this in it?
I'm sorry, is there what now?
Is there any part of you that was uncomfortable publishing an article with this picture on it?
No, I don't think so, no. I think everybody has to. I mean, part of what I say in the article is that it's not just the idea of showing support, it's also it's the concept called spreading the risk around. The more people who are at risk, the less risk each person is individually at. So that's one thing I think it's almost scandalous that American publications aren't reprinting the images, because they're basically saying, hey, it's on you, small group of people who choose to.
You know what? But you know who did, and it surprised the heck out of me, was Washington Post, of all people, republished.
So did the Daily Beast.
Pardon me?
So did the Daily Beast and the Huffington Post.
Yeah. Which are totally surprising. And in fact, I did one, I think it was 3 days ago. Ralph Peters was on Fox talking about that. So I did an article, and it did okay. It's like 185,000 views or something like that. But then in the body of the article that I wrote, I put in a couple 3 of the Charlie Hebdo covers. And then there were a bunch of different cartoonists that responded on Twitter with their own cartoons about it. And that was my thought as as well. In fact, somebody private messaged me, and the reason this is where my question came from. Was it even a consideration for you? Somebody private messaged me saying, "Dude, Housem, you're a father of 5 kids, and you just put up all these different types of things. Does that concern you at all?" And I'm like, and my thought was exactly the same as yours. I was like, well, first of all, I think that any publication on the planet Earth should, number one. Number two, no. I'm such a little, nobody guy sitting in a place in Newport Beach, California. I'm not going to be an object of derision or any kind of weirdness. That's for sure.
Right. Well, and also, I don't know if you know this, but I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, so I have a little bit of a chip myself.
Oh, wow.
A little chip on my shoulder.
But you live in South Carolina, so that doesn't actually help me if I need some help.
No, but I mean that they kind of teach you that attitude of it's funny for an organization that relies entirely on obedience. They sure teach you to get that "don't tell me what to do" attitude.
And God bless them for it. Although I will say this, right. There were a couple of comments on the bottom of that IJR article where people are like, you know what, the followers of Allah will track you down or whatever kind of thing. It's probably some dude sitting in his mom's basement outside Minneapolis writing or whatever.
Yeah, I know. I've written several articles about terror in the Middle East and Islamic terror, and obviously about Iraq and Afghanistan. And I've gotten my share of hate mail. I got a few through Red State that were all in Arabic, and one of which actually threatened my wife and children by name. So it does happen.
Wow.
So that's actually serious.
The closest I came, since we're all kind of throwing the stories in, 2-3 years ago in my personal blog, I wrote a scathing article about radical Islam. And in it, I also, this hypocrisy of anything that isn't flying planes into buildings or sawing people's heads off with dull knives somehow is more about the peaceful religion, stoning women to death and such and such. I wrote this scathing article on my personal blog, and the next day I'm checking the pings, right, to see who's pinged the post. And this Chicago group with whom someone I had read about it, having funding ties to possibly to terrorists, it was the feature article on their website, and it was all in whatever the hell they write, Arabic or whatever. I couldn't translate it, but I was pretty sure it was not a glowing review of what I had written. That was kind of scary to my wife.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. All right, hey, so Caleb, let's move to talking about your news site, Rabble Writers. A couple of articles. Frankly, one of them is what was the impetus for me to contact you to have you come on, because I thought it was so great. Tell us about Rabble Writer, why you started doing that, how this is different from the stuff you do at Truth Revolt and Red State as well. What are you trying to accomplish there, and tell us about it a bit.
Well, Rabble Writer is the main reason is I'd like to be able to have a place where I can post my own thoughts without worrying about making it seem like those thoughts are endorsed or sponsored by someone else. When I write at Red State, I don't want to make them responsible for something I say. So if it's more less newsy, more opinion, although I do opinion at Red State. But it's also for things that are longer. When you write for a place like Red State or Truth Revolt or even Right Scoop, brevity is the name of the game. You just can't be too long because you've got to put out enough quantity to get the ad views and that sort of thing. So this is where I can add a few extra paragraphs, as writers are wont to do. But it's also to talk about things that aren't necessarily tied to a particular news story, because that's another thing that's hard to get a space to do online, is where it doesn't have to be something that happened in the last 24 hours in order for you to be able to publish it.
So it's kind of it's an outlet for what Caleb's thinking beyond just the current news feed of the day.
Well, that was the impetus. What it is now, I can't really go into detail, but it's expanding a little bit, the purpose. But I won't be the only person who is putting articles up there. But I think the main reason that I hope people will go and read it is because there is a space, and it's occasionally filled, and then rapidly the people who fill that space are grabbed up by other publications. But there is a space out there for people who want to read in depth about the things that they themselves believe in, and hear someone say, it's not just you that feels this way, I feel this way too. It's not just you that thinks these things, I think these things too. And I'm hoping to be a part of that space.
Okay, I think that's nifty. One of the ones that caught my eye, and this goes back a little bit. In fact, it goes back a month today. I'm guessing there was a little bit of controversy and pushback. Your article, "We should be torturing more, not less."
Oh, yeah.
Which I loved, the title, by the way.
Well, I think that the real point I want to get at there is the mercurial definition of torture that the American press use as it suits them when they're trying to criticize George Bush or Dick Cheney, and not when they're trying to not criticize Barack Obama. But even more so, our media often fails, despite the advent of the all-powerful Vox explainers. Our media often fails to put things into any sort of historical context or take a look at things in with the view of humanity as a whole and human nature. And when you look at it that way, it is very hard to justify calling something like waterboarding torture. It is very, very hard to call something like sustained loud music torture, because it is not just that something makes you uncomfortable or that you do something that people want you to stop doing. That is a coercion, but it is not coercive in the sense of torture. And I think that, so if what we're doing is torture, if what we've been doing, if we're going to call that torture, then fine, we should be torturing more.
You know what?
And what they want to call it.
Here's the deal. I mean, yeah, waterboarding. Setting aside the fact, let's don't talk too much about that, but the fact that these people who argue that, well, if you torture someone, they'll tell you anything you want to hear, clearly don't understand how the concept of waterboarding works. That does not happen until they've figured out. Well, let me put it this way. It doesn't happen until one more try. They don't ask the questions they want the real answers to until they figure out with these folks through waterboarding that every time now they ask them a question, they're telling the truth. So there's that. There's the fact that sleep deprivation and playing loud music, unless it's some ABBA or someone, is not torture. But here's the bigger point, Caleb, and here's the hypocrisy of the whole thing. And of course, it's the old argument to these folks that on the left who cry torture at every opportunity, and it's the classic, if your wife or your child, if you were pretty certain that in the next whatever amount of time they were going to be killed, would you use these tactics and more to save their lives? And of course, I've never heard any one of them say no.
No, of course not. And they're happy to cheer on Jack Bauer in a fictional television show, because what the fiction does is allow them to express what they genuinely feel, because it's fictional, so there's no guilt associated with it. There's no political ideology associated with it. They could just watch it and be gratified that the bad guy got his just desserts. One of the things that people in America, particularly on the left, but even in the middle, sometimes forget is there is such a thing as a bad guy. We seem to have lost the concept of enemy. Not everybody is out there that can be fixed. Not everyone out there is someone that can be fixed or that can become a friend. Some people are enemies. Some groups are enemies, and they are going to remain your enemy throughout your time on this planet. They are never going to reconcile with you.
And they don't understand the fundamental concept, as does not Barack Obama. No matter how many times you apologize, no matter how many times you be nice, no matter how many times you tell them you understand where they're coming from, to your exact point, if they're your enemy, just because you're not at war with them does not mean they're not at war with you.